Hello. The Divine Code reading for October 15th, pages 259 and 250 and 260. We're in the unit, the Prohibition of Blasphemy, the Introduction, by Rabbi J. Emmanuel Choquette of blessed memory. In the Torah, the sin of blasphemy is circumscribed in terms of cursing God. In this religious context, blasphemy is regarded as so unimaginable a rebellion and offensiveness that the traditional Hebrew terminology for it is the euphemism blessing the name, that is, God. Thus, the very opposite of what it is used to signify. The Torah has two explicit references to this offense. First, Exodus 22:27 states, "You shall not curse God." The Hebrew word used here is kalal, from the root word kal, means to denigrate, to hold in light esteem and despise. See Ibn Ezra and Ramban and Rashi on Deuteronomy 22, verse 23. The second one is Leviticus 24:10 through 17, relates the incident of one who violated the cited injunction of Exodus 22:27, and the divine edict declaring this to be a capital sin. Furthermore, it can be stated there, ish, any man who curses his God will bear his sin. Why is the double expression ish, literally a man, a man? This is to include all mankind, both Jews and Gentiles. Blasphemy thus is prohibited to Gentiles as a capital sin, even as it is for Israelites. See Tractate Sanhedrin 56a and Rambam Hilkot Melachim 9:1 and 3. So in the Torah, when there's an unusual way of expressing something, in this case it's ish. The question is why. It could just simply say a man. It doesn't have to say a man. So they ask the question, what is the purpose of the second ish? Now there can be different reasons for this. So not every time you see ish does it mean this. But in this specific case, it's a reference to it being both for Jew and for Gentile. This reiterates an earlier prohibition of the Noahide Code expressed in the all-inclusive verse of Genesis 2:16. And Hashem, God commanded. And when it says Hashem, they're referring to the Tetragrammaton. The citation of the Tetragrammaton name in this verse alludes to the prohibition of blasphemy to Gentiles. And that's the verse that we find, Genesis chapter 2:16. We find much of the reference to the 7 Noahide laws in that verse, or to the 6, depending on how you count it at that point. The Tetragrammaton is the essential 4-letter name of God: Yud, He, Vav, and He, which was uttered only by the Kohanim, Jewish priests, at certain points in their service in the Holy Temple of Jerusalem. Beyond this prescribed usage, one is not allowed to pronounce this name as it is written. Thus also known as the ineffable name. In sacred service, as public Torah readings, it is substituted by a different name as Adonai, and in vernacular speech, the writing of the Hebrew term Hashem, that means the name. This is also the general non-sacred substitution for the term God. In this and other names of God in Hebrew, one or more dashes or apostrophes are inserted in the name to avoid writing the actual divine name that is forbidden to be erased or dishonored. So there's many levels of protection regarding the name, the specific use of the names of God, the explicit names of God, and also the other names of God that are found in the Bible. They're generally not spoken as they're written. And in some cases, a completely different name is placed, such as Hashem. Or we might use the English term, the English name God. And even in those cases, it's often done in a protected manner. The reason for these various levels of protection is to show reverence for the name. And also, we don't want to use the names of God in general speech because it may come out in a less than reverent manner. It may come out in a common manner, and that is considered denigrating the name, although it's not considered the level of blasphemy, but it's on the road, so to speak. Also see Tractate Sanhedrin 56b, Rambam, Hilkot Malachim 9, topic 1. A Gentile would be guilty of this offense when uttering a blasphemous statement that invokes any of the explicit names in the Torah text. As the explicit names, those which are forbidden to be erased when spelled out in full. So there's certain names that are, if they're spelled out in a proper manner, it's forbidden to erase those names. So oftentimes, if they're going to spell it out in the proper manner, unless it's a very sacred text, they'll put dashes or might change the spelling around, or use another term rather than spelling out the name, because once the name is spelled out, you can't erase it, and that makes it difficult. So it's not, when it's used in a less than absolutely sacred text, it would not be spelled out. It would be written out in a different manner. So these are the terms that, when looking at the name, defining what a blasphemous statement would be, it would invoke one of these explicit names. These are explained more in chapter 1 of this. We're currently in the introduction. So in chapter 1, it goes into a clearer explanation of these names. For example, and they give several examples here, and of course the Tetragrammaton itself, or any appellation clearly referring to God, such as the Supreme Being, the Almighty, the Creator, the Holy One, etc., or attributive names, such as terms distinctly referring to the divine attributes and identifying them with God, such as the merciful or the compassionate, etc., in whatever language it may be. So the attributed names are names that we associate with God. And when it's being spoken in a manner that's clearly associated with God, that would also be a concern. And being an attribute, it can be spoken in whatever language the person is using. Normally, one is punished only for offenses invoking an action. The sin of blasphemy, however, is one of a very small group of offenses where speech on its own is deemed tantamount to criminal action, while actual articulation alone in this context will incur full penalty. Blasphemous thoughts, too, are serious sins. So in a court, in a criminal sense, the speaking of the blasphemy is the distinction of what is considered blasphemy. Thoughts are also a serious sin, but would not be a court. The court would not be involved in that point, but it's also a serious concern. Conceptually, blasphemy is closely linked to heresy and idolatry. Like other Noahide commandments, however, it is really a comprehensive category which subdivides into a number of bylaws. By definition, it invokes not only a generic prohibition, but also implies a number of obligations. An early authority thus notes, do not err about the well-known enumeration of the 7 precepts of the children of Noah cited in the Talmud. In truth, these 7 are like 7 comprehensive principles which contain numerous particulars. Sefer HaChinuch, section 416, and Kavel, section 424. Also note Tractate Sanhedrin 74b. Them, that's the 7 precepts, and all that pertain to them. So when we're talking about the 7 laws, and we just went through the laws of idolatry, and now it's the second laws of blasphemy. So we're seeing an opportunity to compare the Noahide laws. There's a lot of overlap between the laws. And we can say, well, this is part of this, or this is part of that. Each one of the 7 laws is its own distinct category. There's a lot of interconnections. There are interconnections throughout the Torah. But we have to be able to see that there is a distinct category. It's called the Prohibition against Blasphemy. There's many subcategories to this that are all part of an exclamation of the Prohibition against Blasphemy. And sometimes it's difficult to know as particular detail which prohibition it goes under, but there is actually an organization to this, a structure to the Torah laws, that even in areas where there's connections and there's overlap, there's still a structure as to whether something is under, let's say, idolatry, or versus if something is under some other command, or if it's under blasphemy. And there's a clear way of sorting it out. And we have to be aware of that, and that's why we're studying these. That's the purpose of studying these laws, is to make sense. One of the purposes of studying the laws is to be able to make sense out of these areas of overlap. The very idea of there being a divinely ordained Noahide code presupposes an acknowledgement of A, the existence of God, B, the authority of God as supreme being. C, the reality of divine revelation instructing mankind with regards to proper conduct. There's a bond or covenant between the Almighty and his creatures. And D, the principle of divine retribution. That is any man, that man is accountable for obeying or disobeying these instructions because a legal code devoid of consequence is ineffective. So these are all things that have to be understood before we have any discussion of there being a legal system. These are understood ahead of time, and otherwise the legal system doesn't make any sense. Therefore, if we have a legal system, these are assumed to be part of the existence of a legal system. It's presupposed. Thank you.